Hi, fourth graders. We are ready for our next math lesson, and we are on Module 5, Lesson 6. And we're going to continue decomposing fractions using our area model. So when your table of contents is finished, we'll turn to page 1 of our notes today and check out our objective. It says, I can decompose fractions, we've gotten really good at that, into smaller equivalent fractions using an area model. So a couple words I want us to make some codes for so we remember that in this word equivalent, I see and hear part of a word that sounds familiar to me, and that's that equa part of my word. And I think that sounds like equal, and I remember that equivalent means equal fractions. And today we're going to use our area model. Now, it's going to look a little bit like a tape diagram, but I also want you to notice that they're a little bit different because we're going to add more than just one row here. So let's go ahead and get started. And our directions say use an area model to show two equivalent fractions. Well, there's those words we just talked about. Now I already noticed something a little bit different here, and I want to make sure that I know that this whole part is 1, just like we did in our tape diagram. So I know from start to finish of this diagram of this area model is one whole. Now I see that it's broken up into 4 parts altogether, and I can already see that there's a 4 in my denominator down here. Now my numerator up here is a 3, and so that means I have some work to do, and I need to shade in 3 of these boxes. Remember, we use quick math scribbles when we are shading in our image. And now I have 3/4 modeled here on our tape diagram or area model. But my directions say that I need to show equivalent fractions. And so now I want us to figure out how can I turn these fourths into eighths. I wonder what I could do to turn these fourths into eighths. Well, I see the word area model, and I know that area is when I do my length times my width. And so watch how I'm going to turn this into eighths. I took a horizontal line right across every one of those pieces of my tape diagram, and I'm going to check and make sure I turned those fourths into eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I do indeed have eighths now instead of fourths. I didn't change anything that I shaded, but now I'm going to count, well, how many eighths are shaded? Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I can tell that 3/4, what I had very beginning, okay, that was here, is equal to 6/8. Those are my equivalent fractions. I didn't add any shades. I didn't take away any of my shading. It stayed the same. So I was able to find my equivalent fractions. And now we're going to look at, well, how can I write that using addition? And I want to focus, and we're going to bring this word back, our unit fractions. I know that a unit fraction has 1 in the numerator, and then I have a denominator. Okay, so 3/4, but I see a whole lot more than just 3 that I would add. So I'm not going to add fourths. I'm going to use this equivalent fraction we just made. You just determined that 3/4 is equal to 6/8. And so I want to add up all of those eighth pieces to show my addition problem. So I'm going to say 3/4 is equal to 1/8 plus 1/8. Now I know that I'm going to have to do 6 of those because that's how many I have shaded. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 3/4 is the same thing as 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8. Now, we learned last week how simple it was to use our multiplication and a little bit quicker than writing all of these addition. Okay, so how can we now represent our addition sentence using multiplication? So I'm still starting with 3/4 all the way through. You can see that I'm sticking with my 3/4. But friends, Mrs. Houston made a mistake, and so I need you to do a little bit of scribbling out for me. And we're going to scribble out this fraction, and we're going to turn it into the fraction 2/8. And I apologize for that mistake. So I've got two different multiplication sentences, and we're actually going to look at this one first, where I have 6/8 equals something times 1/8. Well, we got really good at that last week, 4th graders, when I recognized, well, there are 6 of these. I have 6 1/8 pieces. I can look at my addition sentence to see that. I can look at my picture to see that I have 6 pieces of 1/8. So here's my multiplication sentence. 6/8 equals 6 times 1/8. Now, I can make another sentence, a new multiplication sentence. And this time I'm going to focus back on 3/4. Well, I did that up here. And we are going to multiply something times 2/8. Well, watch what I'm going to do in my addition sentence to get to 2/8. I'm going to use those parentheses. I'm going to pull those out to make some groups. Inside of these parentheses, I have 1 2/8. I'm going to do it again. Oh, and again. So now all of these groups are 2/8. And if I want to know how many groups of 2/8 I have, I can count 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups of 2/8. And all of these ways, 4th graders, are equal. I know that if I use this multiplication sentence, or this multiplication sentence, or even this addition sentence, they all are representing the same amount, which is 3/4 and 6/8. So we're going to keep practicing and do some more so that we can really get the hang of it. So now we're going to look over here, and it says use an area model to show, well, we're going to do some filling in. So we're going to practice with 2/3, and we want to show that 2/3 is equal to, here's our new fraction, 8/12. Okay, I've got some work to do. So I'm going to start with that very first fraction that we had, and that was 2/3. Well, I already have an area model that's broken up into thirds for us, and so now my job is to shade 2 of them. So we're going to do a quick math scribble shade, and I have represented 2/3. But I can't be finished yet. I can't be finished yet because I need to show that 2/3 is equal to 8/12. Well, let's think about this question, 4th graders. How can I turn thirds into 12ths? Here's how. You're going to think about your multiples. I know this is the area model, and that means I'm going to multiply. I already have 3, so is there something that I can multiply by 3 that gives me 12? If you thought about 4, you are correct. And so I'm going to turn this into having 4 rows going this way. So now I have 1, 2, 3 on the top, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4 coming down. And if I were to count every single one of those squares, I would have 12. Okay, so now I have 12ths. I did it. I turned thirds into 12ths. But I still need to figure out 2/3 was my purple shade. Now let's see how many 12ths I had. Let's go ahead and give it a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I did it. I have 8/12. I didn't change my shading. I didn't make any new shades. Those are exactly the same. 2/3 and 8/12 are equivalent. So if I want to add 2/3 equals, I know that I could add my original 1/3 plus 1/3. We've got that down. Okay? But there's another way I could add that. Because now I have, look at all those 12ths. So let's get started. I could add 1/12 plus 1/12. I'm going to continue on as you are adding up all of your 12ths. Whew, that's a lot to write. Now, I know that that equals 8/12 because I can add them up. But I know that it's also equal to 2/3. My picture proves that 2/3 is equal to 8/12. So, if I want to use a multiplication sentence now to show 2/3, and I already have a 12th here, what am I multiplying? How many 12 pieces did I have? If you said 8, you are correct. I had 8 pieces, and each piece was 1/12. So we were able to just prove that 2/3 is equal to 8/12. So let's go ahead and turn the page and check out what's next. All right, over to page 2. So we're going to keep plugging along. We're going to use our area model to show equivalent fractions again. I see this area model, and I need to figure out, well, what is this fraction? No one told me, so 4th graders, we are going to figure it out. I'm going to count the pieces all together first, and I know that that number of total pieces goes in the bottom. 1, 2, 3, that's my denominator. There are 3 pieces all together. Then I'm going to look at, well, how many of those pieces are shaded, and I see that there's 1. So this area model is represented of 1/3. Okay, well now I need to figure out what is 1/3 equal to. And now I'm going to look down at this area model. Well, I can see it was in the 3rd pieces, just like before, but we've come through and we've put a line across horizontally. And now, if I count the total pieces for my denominator, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. And now there are 1, 2 that are shaded. So, when I look at these pictures, what it means is 1/3 is equal to 2/6. Okay, as I look at this picture, I have 1/3 here. This big green circle is my 1/3. And as I look at these purple boxes, those are my 2/6. That is the exact same size, which means they are equal. So let's write some number sentences, and we're going to start with an addition one first. So I have 1/3. Well, I have 2 things to add, so I know I'm not adding thirds. I'm going to focus on the smaller fraction that I've created, which was 1/6 plus 1/6. So if 1/3 equals 1/6 plus 1/6, that's the same thing as 2/6. Notice how I am tying together from the very beginning that 1/3 is equal to 2/6. We're going to tie our number sentences together from the beginning to the end with those equivalent fractions. So let's peek at it with multiplication. So again, I'm starting with 1/3. I'm going to multiply something. How many 1/6 pieces did I have? I had 1, 2. So I did 2 times 1/6. And oh, here we are again, tying together 1/3 and 2/6 because they are equivalent. You're doing a great job. We've got one more to look at. Okay, and this is similar to what you will find on your exit ticket and problem set today. So there's 2 steps. Decompose each rectangle into 8ths. Okay? Then we're going to use our model to give the shaded area as a sum and product of unit fractions. Well, that's a whole lot of directions, so let's take one step at a time. I see this word decompose, and I know that to decompose something means to break it into smaller pieces. And so I'm going to look here at this area model. The first thing I really want to do, fourth graders, is figure out what is this fraction. And so I'm going to look at just this part, and I see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, and the total goes in the denominator. There are 4 pieces altogether. I see there's 1, 2 that are shaded. So right now the fraction I see is 2/4. 2 shaded pieces out of 4 altogether. Okay, now my direction says to decompose into eighths. So somehow I need to make my 4 pieces into 8 pieces. Well, if you're thinking about making 2 groups, because 4 times 2 equals 8, you are correct. I'm going to draw a line right down the middle. And now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. I did it. I decomposed it into eighths. Well, now we have another new fraction to make. Just like over here before where I had 1/3 and then it all of a sudden turned into 2/6. Let's figure out what 2/4 turned into. We already know that my denominator is 8. My directions told me that. And I need to figure out what's my numerator. I see 1, 2, 3, 4 shaded pieces. So my new fraction is 4/8. So what this means is 2/4 is equal to 4/8. Well, that's step 1. Now I can look at part 2. And it says use our model to give the shaded area as a sum, I know that means I'm adding, and a product, ooh, that means I'm multiplying, of unit fractions. So that means I have a 1 in the numerator and then my denominator. Alright, so let's write some number sentences. I'm going to start with my original fraction, which was 2/4. Now I'm going to do my sum first. Now remember, I'm starting with this original fraction, but my pieces are smaller now, so I need to use my smaller pieces to add. That means that this one smaller piece of 1/8 is what I'm going to focus on. So I can take 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8. Now remember how I liked to sandwich our number sentence over here? I had my old fraction, my number sentence, and I sandwiched it in with the new fraction. We're going to do that again. I have my old fraction, I have my number sentence, and now I want to sandwich it in with my new fraction, which is 4/8. And I know that 2/4 and 4/8 are equal. Okay, but I can't be finished. It told me the sum. I can check that off. Doop. But now I also need to use the product, and I know the product is an answer to a multiplication sentence. So again, I'm going to start with my old fraction, 2/4. I'm going to say equals. Remember, now I have to use my eighths. That's the new part. So how many eighths did I have? I had 4 parts, and those parts were 1/8. Now remember, we like to sandwich it together so he feels nice and closed in, and we say that equals our new fraction of 4/8. So here's what I want you to remember, fourth graders. We start with our old fraction. We make our new fraction by decomposing, and that's the part that I use in the middle to equal that new fraction. You did a great job. Go ahead and work on your problem set and your exit ticket.